looks like we got another review in less than a week since the last one. But yeah, and last Saturday I was able to finish binge watch that. So that's the point. But anyway, for that matter, welcome back to this channel, and yeah, it's self-explanatory. So you know what I mean. I'm gonna review the second season of what I've just watched recently. You know, the show that whatever it's called. But anyway, so that mattered. Let's just get to this video right now because I know it's been a while ever since I have started watching the second season of it. But needless to say, I already watched the first season and I already did a review on that. But that review was on my old channel that I no longer care about anymore. So what to do here is to talk about what really happened in season 2 and I'm gonna share my own thoughts. So as usual. So with that matter, let's talk about the second season of High Potential with my own thoughts as well. So let's do it. So the show, which premiered its first season on September 17th, 2024, was renewed for a second season by ABC on January 21st, 2025 as part of the network's early season renewals. Now, during the production, all of the main cast from the prior season, you know, Caitlin Olsen, Daniel Sunyata, and Vichy Leslie, just to name a few, returned, of course, with Steve Howe joining them as Captain Nick Wagner Jr. via sort of a one-year contract, though becoming the first new series regular. Mackie Pfeiffer as Arthur Ellis and Susan Kellehi Watson as Lucia also joined the show as recurring characters, which would have recurring appearances in the show as well. So, and I think they might return because these are also important to the story. Now, in case you didn't know about already, though, Caitlin, you know, the main actress behind this, of course, she was producer in the first season, but she was up to executive producer in this season. Now, Howie, though, by the way, left this season as a series regular in the season finale. Now, the writers confirmed that there is a possibility for him to return in the following season 3 that's just been renewed recently and as a guest star, but that this is yet to be announced by Howie himself as of right now. But we already saw that cliffhanger at the end, but we don't know how to spoil that. So anyways, now much like the first season, this season was filmed in Los Angeles, being started on March 25th, 2025. Now, when it premiered on September 16th, 2025, the show continued the cliffhanger season 1 finale by wrapping up the events that involved the game maker. Afterwards, the series went a lot more insane thanks to the developments. That is the woman's in camera case that Morgan has been, you know, not so ignored by Soto and later Wagner would eventually get involved into that, and there was some very weird development, and of course we're gonna explain a little bit more, but anyways, let's just move forward. So it took its first mid-season finale break after the release of The One That Got Away. Then it returned on January 6, 2026 with a part 2 or a continuation of that episode. It took the show's second break following the release of The Faust And The Furious, which was stopped on March 3rd, 2026, when it came back following the Olympics. Now the synopsis followed the same as the first season, though, so let me summarize that. Now the series, and also this season, follows Morgan Guillory, played by Olsen, the major crimes consultant and a mom of 3. Wait, did I say mon? Monday, goddamn. And a mom of 3 with a high intellectual potential, whose her antics in solving crimes led to her unusual and unstoppable partnership with fellow detective Adam Karadak, played by Sunyata. So now that you're caught up, let's move forward with the episodes, and this is going to be a little more interesting. So let's get started with the season 2 premiere, Pawns. While working tirelessly to shield her family from the game maker's threats, another crime, that is an abduction of some sorts, drags Morgan back into his game, and the LAPD must decide whether to trust her instincts before the next move turns fatal. So, to recap, there was an abduction of some sort of a woman named Maya Price, and that was somehow adopted by, you know, by the game maker or something. I can't remember. I think so, but they had to talk to around what's going on with the development, and of course that is shocking because that was a lot. But of course Morgan and the game makers' antics are getting a little more interesting here because they did absolutely sort of in a weird way, of course, because they have because the game maker tried to force Morgan to again to do something against him, which is something. But I guess their antics is still interesting though. Also, the weird development that episode is where we had to look at some situations between some of the characters though. But but that major some. So I can't remember, but so I just finished watch that, but but this one is interesting though, since that was a very wild one. But the only part I found it interesting is where we look at the game maker and Morgan's development. But at the end though, there was an sort of a car chase, which was a lot, but I think someone has a lot to talk about. So I guess that's what I can remember from the first episode. So I give it an A- after watching it. So let's move forward to episode 2 that is titled Checkmate. As the major crime scene desperately seeks answers amidst a string of unresolved crimes, which was, the overall elements, something like the Maya Price abduction to some sort of abduction of some sorts. Morgan suspects that the game maker is responsible, which was revealed to be true and meanwhile, Daphne and Oz set out to find woman, in which they suspect that it's not woman, but an alter Alice. And of course, Elliot, which is one of Morgan's children, prepares a surprise act for his school's establishment, which was a rap about MC squared. But I found it interesting though. But anyways, and that episode is a lot. Of course, it is so, I might say, wow. Like, finally we knew that the game maker is responsible for all of it. A lot to say that this was, a lot. But I might say this is going to be a huge episode. Like, it's so huge to see that the game maker is actually responsible for that, which totally wraps up the story, and at least they're finally moving on from that. Also, we know that the Wilmington Cabot case is now getting a little more interesting as Daphne and Oz try to look for him, and but no something like that. They didn't even find him, but at least Arthur did approach Morgan though at the end, where some source, I don't know what's going on, but I think Arthur gave his number to her, so I guess there's something. And I think it's possibly about the case, but some source, we don't know. But for now, Checkmate is still a wild episode, but still was alright though, so I found the MC squared web a little interesting, so beats here. Now to 11 minutes. Now, when a man with a troubled past is killed under mysterious circumstances, Morgan and the LAPD uncover a tragic motive behind his death. Meanwhile, Morgan opens up to Ava about her father, forcing Ava to confront truths she isn't ready to face. And which they're, of course, as we know, she's talking about, how the case is going on, but but I just wanted to, but from what I can remember, this was a lot. Like, they're looking for some development, some sort. I can't remember, but yeah, I guess that's might say that this was a lot. Like, somebody was being killed under some circumstances of sorts. From what I can remember, this was something. But yeah, and that was something like that. Like, the development in this episode is crazy though. From what I can remember, that's basically what I can say, because I was just, but this episode was a lot. It was alright though, especially that, but the overall development is good, so I guess B+, I guess. So yeah, I only can remember from my mind though, so if you wanted to say something, and I'm reading notes from my keep notes, so get it. So anyways, let's move on to Behind the Music, which is an episode that sounds interesting. Now, an investigation involving the murder of a local singer uncovers details that reopen a strikingly similar decades-old cold case, which was a lot, and we found out that whoever this producer is the one who's responsible for that, which was shocking, but it was not. It was actually presumably the daughter of, the whatever this thing is, but later on, the team rallies around Soto after she is passed over for the captain's chair, which we know that it is Captain Wagner Jr. now. So, and let's talk about Captain Wagner for a second. Now, Howie, when debuted in the season, though, with this episode, had a large mustache. The reason for this was because another show Howie was on, that I can't remember what's the name, required him to have a full beard. However, the show's executives didn't want him to have a beard, but rather be clean-shaven. The other show requested that he not be clean-shaved, so the compromise between the execs was to have a mustache. But when his physicality contract with the auto show expired, the production team of the show requested him to shave it. The change was explained in show as the result of Morgan's teasing. The cast and crew have donned the quote-unquote Stachegate. Now, I found this interesting though, and this is weird, like totally weird. Like never have I ever seen something weird like this, but this is odd. So needless to say, this was the weirdest development that happened in such character when they came on in the first couple of episodes, but this is weird. Never have I ever seen anything like this, but of course, this is hilarious. Also, the case is a lot. It's a tough one, but they decided to solve that, and that was emotional though. So I guess be cheer for that? You know what I mean. Up next is content warning. When a social media stunt turns deadly, and sort of been poisoned some stuff in a car, or something happened in the car, I don't know. I think Morgan and Karadek head to an influencer content house to track down answers, of which the producer has, or I don't know, some source has a lot of development though, because whoever did that, I guess. Meanwhile, the LAPD team adjusts to Captain Nick Magnus's new role, as captain, which has a couple of development though. And also, Ava seeks out more information on Roman's disappearance, of which, let's face it, that's a lot. Of course, as we know, Ava talks to Arthur from what you can tell, but yes. But at least this episode has something, a lot of development from that. But I guess that stunt turned crime is odd. This is odd, but needless to say, this is a very odd episode. The overall development is okay. The investigation is good though, but Ava finding out more stuff on the disappearance of woman is such in retrospect. So B+. Chasing ghosts, and this is fitting. It's almost Halloween, and the team investigates a spooky case where a wealthy lawyer is found dead in his haunted Victorian mansion, while Captain Wagner surprises everyone with his kills. Wait, so this is weird. Hold on. Now, there were, this is odd because somehow there were ghosts in that mansion. Whatever this thing is, what's going on, but this is weird, like, for some reason. Also, that ghost, at first I thought that it was someone else in that ghost, but actually it wasn't, because someone else was inside the house before they left, and that one actually killed the one that is the lawyer, of course. But yeah, this is odd. But on the other side, at home, Elliot plays mediator between Morgan and Ava, which was interesting though. That episode was not so great much, but still it was alright. And the ghost development made me a little more pointless though. So yeah, so I guess C+. I was not so amused with it, but now onto the mid-season finale, the one that got away. Now when a priceless painting, I might say the beautiful girl of some sorts painting is stolen in a museum heist, Morgan and Karadek team up with an art recovery expert named Rice, or Reese, or if you wanted to pronounce that, to unravel a tangled case and fuse ownership battle, which was a tough one, especially when we were talking about two people and the others. Of course, there were two people who was interested in that, and the grandmother of someone else. And meanwhile, Soto's determined to uncover the secrets hidden inside woman's backpack, of which she was eventually claimed from Arthur. So, or I think Morgan did claim that from Arthur, but So let's see. So this episode was a lot to say, especially the fierce battle between the whatever this thing is, the one who wanted to display the art, and the one who first saw the art and she was in Warsaw before the war. But yeah, that was a lot. Like, as we say, this was fierce, and also there were some huge developments, and there were a lot to say. This was a lot. So this was a very crazy episode, and to say that, yeah, Reese's has a lot of development though. So at least this episode has, but with that matter, I guess this was a wild one, so A-. Hey there, thanks for making it so far into this video. Now before I should continue, I'm gonna pause for a moment. Now, yeah, by subscribing to this channel, you'll give me more support than right now, because the way you subscribe to this channel, the support that you give to me will be important to my future, of course. I'm currently recovering from the passing of my paternal grandfather, and I just want to get myself back into relevancy now. So if you wanted to continue to support myself as you usually do, then please like this video, comment if you have any suggestions what should I do next, subscribe to this channel, and also to my Eurovision channel where I do Eurovision content, and hit that bell and set it to all, so where you're going to get all notifications when a new sort of videos pops up. And this is you can also check out my socials in my link tree linked, and this channel's homepage as well, where you can also find all my other socials. Now with that matter, let's get you back into this video. Now let's move on to part 2 of the previous episode. That is the one that got away part 2. Now Morgan's suspicions of Reese goes deeper as the case of the missing Rembrandt artwork continues. Yes, that artwork from the previous episode. Elsewhere, Roman's missing backpack caused problems for everyone being involved there. And eventually that episode closed the case, which was, of course, we know that the artwork was actually stolen, actually took by the two people interested in that, and the police are trying to stop them. But eventually that art was actually being taken by Reese, which eventually decided to bring it back to the person who first saw that, and well, realized that there were 2 copies. The one that is real is actually stolen. The one that was fake was the one that the grandma, the wise man woman has saw that and realized that it was fake. But eventually it was turned over, and yeah, so she was able to see that. But also the missing backpack has a lot of development because it was problems for everyone who was involved, Soto, Ava, and whatever you call it. But at least this episode has a very interesting development. So, A tier. Under the rug, as Morgan and Caradic investigate the mysterious death of a hitman and a car crash, they uncover details that force the LAPD and FBI to partner in the case. Of which, well, this is interesting, but the weirdest part is where, the sort of director of some sorts, or I think of some branch of some sorts, was behind that, and I think so was actually the one who is involved in that. So but anyways, meanwhile, Elliot tries to rekindle romance for his parents, which were Morgan and Ludo, of which they were not so great after they divorced, but still living together, which is interesting though. But he tries to rekindle that, which is interesting though, so that was something. But it's weird to see that the weird development and the LAPD and FBI, whatever this thing is odd, and that investigation is kind of weird, so this was odd. So needless to say, B tier. Let's just move on right now. So yeah. Oh, and yeah, that episode is simply titled Grounded. As you might know, this is air related, so that is also related to what we're talking about, as the team investigates the mid-air murder of an Air Force veteran, of which someone from the design team, the air, whatever this thing is, decide to, the thing that boosts oxygen was actually a fatal flaw, which led to that death. But eventually, Morgan works on to crack the case despite being sidelined to mandatory detective training because of Solomon's orders. Yeah, and Solomon unfortunately doesn't want to get Morgan back to the scene. However, Soto did talk to Solomon about that, and eventually, after a tough talk, Solomon decided to go ahead with it. So he decides to let Morgan stay stay around. So stick around. So that was a tough talk. But elsewhere else, Wagner and Soto's leadership conflict comes to a head, which is odd. So yeah, that was a very tough one because Morgan being sent to detective training is weird, but weirdly sneaking out to help with the investigation is weird. But needless to say, this was a tough one that even Solomon wanted to fire her, but not anymore. So B tier. What a crazy episode. So NPC. You know what I mean? So, when a former esports champion is mysteriously murdered, both his gaming rival and a sushi chef are under suspicion, of which this is weird because that gaming rival sushi chef was actually one person. Wait, what? So hold on. The whatever the sushi chef thing is, he's the son of one of his supposedly two sons, of which one doesn't exist and one that is actually under two identities, gaming rival and chef, of which that was unfortunate. But eventually, eventually found out that it was actually them because there was some poison on the esports championship sushi that he ate, which is unfortunate. But anyways, time spent with Elliot unexpectedly provides Morgan with insights on the case, of which Elliot was playing the same game that esports champion used to play. And Karadek reconnects with a woman from his past, that is Lucia, which we're finally able to look at her now, so at least there was something. But yeah, their rekindling is about to start from here, so at least there's something. So this episode is great to say the least, but at least there was a couple of development that really happened in that episode, so at least there's something. But it's a lot, so I give it an A-. The Faust and the Furious. Now, Oz faces a deeply personal struggle when he discovers that his late father's headstone was never ordered because, his mom went out of financial assistance for the burial assistance, goddamn. Elsewhere, the team investigates the murder of a tech founder who's obsessed with life extension. That is what we're looking at because somehow, if you wanted to talk about somehow that guy was actually being killed by himself, which was caused by some sort of gas. And, the meditation of his house for some reason. But somehow it really happened. I don't know what's going on. But this was weird because, that meditation thing was a part of his, usual stuff. But unfortunately, I didn't even see that coming. But at least whoever did that, and yeah, that was crazy. So that was a crazy one. But, the overall development is odd. So at least there's something. But at least Oz decided to, along with the things to the help of Soto and, of course, his team as well, which did surprisingly well. And yeah, that's for respect. So I guess this episode was weird, but interestingly, a lot. So that was something. Also, the weird moment I saw was when Morgan and Karadek were trapped in the same room where that tech founder was killed. But when Morgan went a mental breakdown after the door was locked, of which Gas decided to start to swirl around, and Morgan wanted to have a mental breakdown of that, but thanks to Karadek, eventually she was calmed down with that huge, comfort of some sorts, and eventually they decided to escape. So that was the most shocking moment I've ever seen that Morgan even done. So what that mattered, that's an A-. I have to say, this was crazy. But this episode was also getting an A- for me, so you know what I mean. Alright, let's move on to In the Driver's Seat. Now, the team investigates a late-night luxury car heist turned deadly, of which that was weird. Somehow, whatever is going on, uncovering a complex web of details and multiple perpetrators, of which... Wait, what's going on? So that... Well, at least there were some weird ones because someone was shot, or whatever this thing is. I think a teacher, a professor of some sort was killed first, then they decided to snap on the car. And whatever the thing is, the ones responsible is the car dealer, which is weird. And meanwhile, though, Morgan has mixed feelings when Ava begins focusing on her future, which, let's face it, this was... a lot, but this was complicated. But at least there was something. So at least this episode's alright, though. Needless to say, it was alright from what I can tell. But yeah, so B tier. There's nothing else much to say about it. I don't have any worries about it. But from what I can remember, that was a lot. Like, they have been covering multiple developments, which is odd. So yeah, so let's move on now, alright? Let's move on to If You Come for the Queen, of which this episode is interesting, though, because Dabney, though, officially has decided to lead an investigation into the attempted murder of a beloved colleague and mentor, of which Daphne is this was the first time Daphne leads an investigation, which is further complicated when it intertwines with another case that is an I might say an overdose case of sorts, of which that was a lot. And also later on, Ava comes on to Daphne for advice and support. Now, let's just explain, because this episode sounds interesting. At first, there were some weird developments between, Dottie, Daphne's colleague and mentor, was choked by someone, of which is suspiciously that the one who actually did that was Officer Huff, of which I never expect that this was Jake Austin Walker, of which I already remember him from Stargo, and never have I ever seen him, of which he did very interestingly well in that role, but that wasn't him. That was actually a suspicion, but actually they said Daphne, after a little development though, and Dottie somehow turned into the case despite being not so well, decided to help with it to find what's going on, of which Dottie's is sort of a former colleague and eventually now turned not so great enemy, was actually the one who led that, and actually the one who somehow killed whoever that person who overdosed. Of course, that is the one that is doing the fitness stuff. But this episode's interesting though, but at least Daphne did absolutely well with when she decides to arrest Phyllis and calming her down. But yeah, this was a lot. And also Ava coming to talk to Daphne for advice and support is interesting though, so at least there was something. So 8's here. What a crazy episode, but that was something. Now on to Pie in the Sky, when a renowned retired astronaut, which is also what Elliot's been a fan of, is murdered in plain sight thanks to when VX, Morgan and the team uncover some of his mysterious entanglements, of which this was weird, because somehow some stories are what's going on the fiance of that astronaut is actually the one who's responsible for that, and especially though someone from a college that is a runner and a singer is responsible, but not so. It was actually the fiance. And on the other side, and this is interesting, as Soto travels to New York to meet a high-profile political fixer connected to the woman's disappearance that we know is Willa Quinn. Hold on, ... This was crazy, because somehow their heated development gets interesting from here as they start to talk to, and eventually at the end we were at when Soto returned, so did Willa. She made it to LA for some reason. This was heated, like for some reason this is cooked, and yeah. But however though, the overall development this episode is crazy though, and somehow you're having the good luck charm of that renowned astronaut though is interesting though, so I guess this is something. So I might say B+. Turn up the heat. Morgan relies on old friends to help with a case involving street artists, of which that development is where an vandalist has been killed by an architect of that project that has been long abandoned, and that was supposed he wanted to destroy that, but eventually they stopped that. However, Karadec leans on the woman in his life during a time of need, of which he decided to lean back to Lucia after he was been injured when that explosion happened in that building, where he was injured at the back of his head. So yeah, eventually though, their date seems to have fine in the hospital though, so at least there's something. So yeah, but the overall development and the case of some sort. So this was crazy though, like totally relying to someone who was talking about with her former husband's work. Or at least this was something. So I might say beats here. This was tense. So yeah, and let's move on to the more tense yet final 2 episodes. And you know what I mean. on to second Sunday now, of which Ragnar joins Morgan and the team on a hunt for the crew behind a series of high-sweeping into elite private votes, only to uncover a far more dangerous endgame, a looming cyber attack that could cripple Los Angeles' core infrastructure. Now, that's a lot. Now, of course, there's a couple of development because that group, or whatever this thing is, had decided to, snack on a couple of what was going on, but yeah, they were first for the whatever hard drive thing, but that high scoop some sorts. I think they were the ones who murdered whoever this guy is. I think, I think I can remember, but yeah, but this was a lot because as you may know, this was the most crippled one. But at least Wagner did actually lead off with with Canada to find that, but only to saw a trap that something exploded, which led to injuries of a couple of But yeah, but the weirdest and interesting one is when Wagner was in the scene and have Morgan said to stop by to pick him up, was go back to his house, which is rare because he drank. Yep, he drank whiskey of some sorts. But anyways, but the most exciting part is where we have to see that moment. So, Wagner used to have his own fiance, which was murdered by that same group, group behind that heist. But yeah, Wagner has a lot of feeling not so great after that. But he realized that they are and the leader of that group is the one who murdered his fiance, I guess, which led to an emotional fight, but eventually stopped. And thankfully, of course, as with that, this was the most toughest one because, yeah, this was so tough. But in the end, everyone's now rekindled now, and needless to say that Morgan and Wagner literally kissed in the elevator for some reason. Never have I ever seen that. Also, of course, we have a very interesting development though on the other side because there's some suspicions we're going into that Willa Quinn has seen in those photos that Soto has saw us and that. But yeah, and also please mind that I don't have some stills from that episode, just some images because I could not find it from the wiki that I sourced it. But anyway, so this episode was a lot. It was pretty sure it was, I guess, the most toughest one, so A tier. Now to the season 2 finale family tree. A woman is found dead at the Lock Street Hotel where Lucia works for some reason, posing a potential complication for Carradec and Morgan's investigation of which, let's face it, this was weird because somehow whoever was at the hotel has some compliance with Lucia or some sort, which led to potentially be the one who murdered that. But that person also used to love Lucia. I guess I think have some compliance, but we realize in the spoiler that Lucia is the one who killed that woman for some reason. So yeah, this was weird, but needs to say about that. Elsewhere, Ava races to come up with the perfect idea for her art show, of which she decides to use her dad's photos, some photos of her dad's murals, but she ripped it for some reason. And needless to say, this is nice. I really like the, I might say, the overall look of her quote-unquote family tree, hence the title of this episode, of which this was interesting. Also, Willa Quinn, again, yes, Willa Quinn was in LA, once again, as we know from episode 16. I think we already heard that Will was already in LA, and with Nick Wagner Jr.'s father, of course, which he also debuted in that episode. And in this episode, things are heating up because Nick Wagner Jr. and Morgan decided to go to talk to Willa, of which Willa threatened Morgan's kids, and she led to a crazy road rage, of which you don't understand. This is the weirdest moment I've ever seen, though, which is weird. Also, in the end, there was some major development, though, as we know. This was emotional. Yes, you might know that if you remember from earlier, Wagner Jr. or in this case, Howie is a series regular for just a season, of which the following seasons though will not see him at least in the starring role capacity, of which I think it will be recurring or I don't know. But as we know, he was shot in the end. Yes, he was shot by some unknown FBI ghosts. Possibly, I don't know. And also a shadow of some sort speaking into Ava. I don't know what's going on, but I think that's a cliffhanger for you guys. Yes, that is a cliffhanger, of which we're gonna find out more once season 2 premieres. Yes, it's confirmed, season 3 is coming, so you get the point. But this was tough. Of course, we realized that Lucia is the one who was behind that is shocking, and also the fierce rivalry of Willa and Morgan when Willa decided to call out and threaten Morgan's kids, whatever call it. But this was weird. Like somehow Morgan decided to make a weird development by violating whatever this thing, traffic safety, whatever this thing is, because she was behind. She went through if the red light is on for some reason, which is the weirdest one. But yeah, but I think she paid that fine, whatever this thing is. But at the end, well, yeah, that was something. So this episode was crazy, like totally crazy, and I don't have any words for it. So 8 here for me now. So yeah, I guess this season is alright though. By the way, of course, there are some very interesting developments though. Like if we revisit episode of course, episode 3, of course, is where we had to see Ava doing something weird, like, and having a little fight with Morgan because of her dad's mules for some reason, and they went on to a cell for that reason because somehow somebody decided to, because they somehow what I don't have any words. I think they have a fight to vandalize. Somehow did that, which is weird, which they but eventually decided to knock out thanks to Karadek, which is funny though. But Ava's character is interestingly good here. Like she is fine, but she still has some grudges regarding to her father, that is Woman. Woman has been much, but we're still looking forward to see what's going on with him because he still has Silhouette and the season 2 finale because he wasn't been casted yet. Meanwhile, some of the other episodes were right though, and some in this case investigations were sometimes crazy, but still, I might say weird and a little more insane though. But yeah, and on the characters aside, things are getting interesting from here. Like first off, we have the new guy here, Nick Wagner Jr. Well, Captain's character development in the seasons are right though, at least. From having a mustache in that season is interesting. Earlier in the season is really odd, but eventually he got out after his one in that auto show being expired. So at least his character development is good though. Too bad he was shot. And on the other side, some of the other characters like Daphne is alright though. It's basically she's good though, but at least she made it her her own investigation on her own, her leading her first one, which is historic, I guess. Oz in this case is alright though. He has some very grudges, especially after his late father's headstone wasn't even delivered, and thankfully thanks to the help of Soto, they decided to organize a private funeral with some colleagues and of course Oz's families, which is interesting enough, but they were helpful. Thank you so much. And on the other side, Soto's character development got insane from having some stuff into leading off to a crazy development with the Woman investigation, heading off with Willa or Quinn. In this case, this is crazy. It's crazy. And importantly, of course, Willa has some very interesting development, especially when talking to Soto and Morgan, which I found it interesting. On the other side, Karadek is alright, especially his character development is sort of good for now, especially that his relationship with Lucia is now good for the most part, which is nice. But there were some shocking parts that sort of break apart. Of course, Lucia was incarnated because of the crime that she made with on the season finale. And Morgan, of course, importantly, her intellectual potential is got even insane from here. Like she totally did that. So first of all, of course, her outsmarting the game maker is wild, and also her having grudge with Willa after that call out is crazy, like totally crazy. Also her mental breakdown and the episode where of course, the episode, I think the one that's, hold on. Oh. The Faust and the Furious, of course, I think. Yeah, that's the one where, Morgan went mental breakdown because of that gas thing that she inhaled, which somehow calmed down things to Karadek, which is nice. Hey guys, post-production Duncan here, and I just noticed, we know that panic attack that Morgan did and Karadek's subsequent handling of it, well, that was praised on social media, and immediately it went viral for at least a couple of days after this episode was premiered, so I just noticed about that, but I found this interesting, so back to the discussion video now. Haha, because I just found this moment a little more wild, but anyways. But, her character antics is getting interesting from here, so I'm so glad that she able to sort of change ways despite of the recent situation that is the Roman case. But, yeah, this season is interesting, though, for the most part. Like, there's some interesting parts. Some were insane, some were weird, some were alright, but some were, itty-bitty, but I guess. And some fun moments that I could not forget. So, yeah, so this season was totally packed, I guess, but at least it's still good to say that this gets an A-. So for the whole season, two, this gets an A-. So I might say this was wild. I'm looking forward for season 3 because I'm somehow obsessed with this show, especially at what's going on right now. So I think I'm looking forward for the coming episodes, whatever. So yeah, that's High Potential Season 2 for you now. So with that matter, that's it for this review, of course. There was nothing else much to add except that this was it. So I have some other content that I have to work out for the next couple of weeks as we're about to approach May. Daredevil Born Again Season 2 is the one I'm going to binge watch next, and that's the one I'm also going to review next. And yeah, after that, I might plan for some other series and whatever distinct reviews on this channel as well. So look forward to that. Also, some developments on some of my videos will be a little pushed over because of the Eurovision Song Contest that I'm dealing with right now. I'm looking forward to see what's going on because this is going to be a wild one. So with that matter, that's it for today's series of developments here on this channel. Please make sure you like, comment, subscribe, and hit that bell, and check out my socials main link tree. My name is Duncan Nichols, and thank you for watching today's review. I know this is crazy, right?